Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Saturday, the weekend is here. I hope you're having a good one wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world. Thank you very much for joining me. I really do appreciate it on match day weekend. Unfortunately, I have to wait a little bit longer. Sunday, 2 p.m. kickoff, Arsenal versus Crystal Palace tomorrow. Arsenal looking to cement their spot at the top of the Premier League table, and we'll know what Liverpool have done by that point. Of course, they're in action a little bit later on today, 8 p.m. against Brentford. Tricky looking game for Arne Slot's side, but they are coming into it on the back of a really good win in the Champions League, of course, in midweek. Then we've got Manchester City tomorrow as well. So I hope you're doing well. I hope the weekend has started well, as always. We're going to look at that game tomorrow against Crystal Palace in today's show. Look at some of the big talking points that came from Mikel Arteta's press conference yesterday. I'll give my thoughts on plenty of those. Some interesting stuff there. We're going to talk about team news first of all. Gabriel, injury doubt. That's a worry. I've kept him in my FPL side though, so I'm still pretty convinced he'll play and start. Fingers crossed. We'll talk about that. It is a decision Mikel's got to make because there are obviously plenty of games coming up between now and the international break. So he's got to decide, and he does have options to potentially rotate if he wants to. So we'll talk about that. We'll look at what he's been saying about Zubimendi, Eberechi Eze playing against his former side this weekend, of course, as well. We spoke about Victor Gyökeres and Kai Havertz in the embargo section of the press conference yesterday. Some interesting stuff there. Got comments and questions. So loads to get stuck into on this Saturday morning. But we'll start with Gabriel. It's obviously the big sort of talking point ahead of the game now. Mikel revealing in his press conference yesterday that he has not been able to train since the game against Atletico Madrid. We know he went off in that game about 20 minutes to go, believed to be suffering with a neck issue. He said Big Gabby had to leave the pitch against Atletico with an issue, and he hasn't been able to train yet. We'll see how he evolves in the next 24 hours to see whether he's available or not for the weekend. Obviously, in the training pictures that were released yesterday, there was no sign of Gabriel, but we know that doesn't mean that he's not going to be involved this weekend. If there's any doubts over any sort of players, they don't tend to get into the training pictures. So it is a decision to make, really. I'll just quickly, before I get onto that, just in terms of the other long-term absentees, your Madueke, Odegaards, Jesus, Havertz, Mikel said they are progressing really well. They are starting to do certain activities. They are all super willing to be available as quickly as possible. But at the moment, none of them are in contention in the next week or so. So that's what he said on the long-term absentees. On Gabriel, it is a bit of a decision to make. The one thing is, there's no game that Gabriel's going to be playing in midweek because he's not going to be playing in the League Cup against Brighton anyway. Well, I presume he wasn't going to be playing in that game anyway because Mikel is going to rotate pretty heavily in that game. So it's not like you've got to make a decision based on whether he's going to be fit to play on the Tuesday night or the Wednesday night or not. You've got a decision of, right, is he going to get through this? And then he's not going to play for another week or so, or certainly start for another week or so. And you do have plenty of other options. If they decide it's best not to risk Gabriel, you can, of course, play Calafiori as the left-sided centre-back. You can play Mars Lewis-Skelly at left-back. You can play Pierre Hincapié, who that one feels a little bit less likely just because we've not seen Hincapié. You know, he's had a handful of minutes a long time ago now against Athletic Bilbao in the Champions League. We've not seen him yet in the Premier League. So that one kind of feels unlikely, throwing him straight into the start in that left centre-back role. But we know he can play there. He's played there before for Leverkusen. Of course, you can just play Christian Mosquera as the left-sided centre-back, keep William Saliba as a right-sided centre-back. Mosquera's absolutely bang up to speed. It was Mosquera who came on in midweek when Gabriel got injured. He's proven already this season that he's more than capable of dealing with what the Premier League has got to offer. So that's the most likely option here, and then you can keep Calafiori, who's been so good at left back, playing in that position. Whoever comes in, if Gabriel doesn't make it, and I'm still leaning towards Gabriel's going to be fit for this game. If someone comes in, they're going to be up against Jean-Philippe Mateta, of course, on the back of him scoring a hat-trick in his last Premier League game, one of the strongest players in the Premier League, strongest centre-forwards in the Premier League, scored a brilliant goal against Arsenal at the Emirates last season. So it is going to be a tough physical battle for the defence. That is why I'm absolutely sure Mikel Arteta will desperately want Gabriel and Saliba next to each other to deal with the threat of Mateta. And if it isn't Gabriel, if it is a Mosquera, for example, they're gonna be tested, no doubt about it. So it is a big decision for Mikel to make because you don't want to take any risks with Gabriel as well. If there's any sort of issue that you you worry about playing him could aggravate things further. The last thing you want is Gabriel to be sidelined for any significant amount of time. He's arguably up there with, in my view, probably the three most important players that Arsenal have in terms of starting 11 right now, which is Bukayo Saka, Martin Zubimendi, and Gabriel. I think if anything were happen to one of those players for a really big period of time, you'd be worried. Not that Arsenal do have the options to cover them, but I think those are the three most important players, really. You take Gabriel out of this team, you miss an awful lot in defence and in attack. You take Zubimendi out of this team, then everything changes. Basically, you've got to move things around, move players around, and it's not going to be quite the same. And obviously, Bukayo Saka is Bukayo Saka. So I think that those are the three most important players. So that's the decision Mikel's going to make. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What would you do if you're Mikel Arteta? Do you sort of err on the side of caution here and give him a bit of a rest and let whatever the issue is recover fully? Or if you think, you know what, he's okay, he's going to be able to deal with this, do you just put him in, play him alongside William Saliba and let him go up against Jean-Philippe Mateta? Let me know your thoughts on it all in the comments below. Obviously, it's a big game for Eze this weekend, sort of emotionally, more than anything else, mentally, I suppose, as well, going up against his former teammates, going up against his former club, his former supporters, for the first time since he left. They didn't leave it in a sort of acrimonious way or anything like that. And the sort of overwhelming feeling you got from that move at the time was that Crystal Palace fans wished him well and were happy for him to get this big move after everything he'd done for the club. But it is still going to be a big moment for him. Mikel said it's a big game for us because last season we dropped some points, and it's the fourth game in a row that we're going to play against opponents that we dropped points against last season. So far, we've been able to beat them, and our focus is on that. We know for Ebbs, it's going to be a very special match with the history and what he did for Palace, but the focus is on our team. And it is. And I'm sure Eze will be fine with it. I mean, how many times have we seen former players come back to haunt Arsenal in the past? It'd be very nice if this time around it could be the other way around. And I think Eze's had a good start to life at Arsenal. I don't think it's been spectacular by any means. And I think some people have looked at that and thought, oh, he's not really doing what I expected him to do. But he's settled in pretty well. He's played in a fair few positions so far. He's contributed, he's scored, he's got a couple of assists. And I think he's just learning a completely new way of playing it. And I think he's done it well. Is there room for improvement? I think there definitely is, but I still think he's had some good games and is doing fine. And fingers crossed he can really sort of explode into life tomorrow against his former team. And as Mikel said, it is a side that Arsenal dropped points against in this fixture last season. And in the last three, they've done so well to sort of bounce back from doing that last season. Lost at Newcastle last season, went and won this season. Lost at home to West Ham last season, beat them this season. Then last week, of course, having dropped points against Fulham with a draw last season, they go and beat them this season. So they got 9 points from games where they only picked up 1 point last season. They've got a chance to make it 12 from 2 this season because they drew this game. And Mikel was asked, is that game against Palace going to sort of form any of your messaging, your pre-match messaging when you're doing your team talks and all that sort of stuff? And he said, if we want a very different outcome, we'd better do very different things than we did last year, especially in these fixtures. We know what Palace are doing, what Oliver Glasner is doing for the football club and the way they are getting results. So it's going to be a really tough match. We're going to play again in front of our crowd, and we are confident that if we hit our level, we have a big chance to win. So that's what Mikel has been having to say ahead of this game against Crystal Palace. I mentioned Zubimendi earlier, who I think is just so important to this Arsenal team already. What a signing. He has been signing in the summer for me across football in this country. I mean, there'll be other players you could argue, maybe other rival fans will argue. But for me, Zubimendi coming in such an important position with so much pressure on him to perform straight away, the way he's done it, I just think has been absolutely brilliant. He was so good against Atletico Madrid in midweek. So Mikel was asked about him and he said, well, every player is different. We have some terrific midfielders here. He brings a certain hierarchy, certain composure that is very difficult to understand. And then the way he perceives information and learns from the game and what is actually happening in the game at the speed is remarkable. I think, again, about him, it was about unlocking certain spaces and his capacity to look further and to hold the position when his teammates are further from the ball than himself. And then, yeah, if he can add goals to it, even better. I mean, I knew Zubimendi was going to be good. I've said this before. I knew he was going to be good. I just didn't know he was going to be this good so quickly. The way he has adjusted, adapted, fitted into this team, learnt that position so well. He's been he's been a definite upgrade in that position. Arsenal are better in that position now than they were. There's no doubt about it. And Thomas Partey was very good in that position, and undoubtedly was very important when he was in this team for Arsenal. But for me, I don't think there's even a question about it now. The way you watch Arsenal play at the moment, the way Zubimendi's playing, I just think he has clearly taken that role and moved it forward and has just been so important. And he gets Arsenal moving quicker. He gets the ball moving quicker. He gets it moving forward quicker. And he's so good in the air. Like, his aerial success rate is just ridiculous. He's a different player to Partey, and he's brought a different sort of style to that midfield position, I think. But he's just been wonderful. And signing of the summer for me, absolutely. And all the signings we made, he is undoubtedly the standout so far. I think he's been absolutely superb. Mikel's been speaking about atmosphere ahead of the game. Not sure if you've seen the quotes on it or not, but he was talking about atmosphere and how he needs the fans to do sort of everything and to play the game with us, I think he said. Let me try and find the quotes here for you. He said, the atmosphere is one of the most important things, and I love that because we don't expect supporters to just turn up at the stadium. We want them to play the game with us, which is very different. It's a good test on Sunday at 2 p.m. how we're going to turn up after a big Champions League win. We're going to do another step and do something we didn't do last year. Everybody has to turn up to the stadium with that mindset. So that's what we want to see. And he kind of saying this in response to questions about the fact, like, at half-time now, Arsenal are turning off the screens in the concourse where everyone's drinking and saying, get back out to your seat. We need you for the second half, rather than watching the game down under the concourse on the big screens. And I think that when he's pointing to saying, look, it's Sunday at 2 p.m. after a Champions League game, the fact he said that quote, I think he knows that that sort of game is a game where the atmosphere is just going to be a little bit dead. Normally a 2 p.m. kickoff on a Sunday when everyone's tired and probably been out on the Saturday night. It's off the back of a really sort of big Champions League win. It's just got a sort of pretty low atmosphere written all over it there, and he's trying to change that. He doesn't want that. He knows that fans are so important, and they are so important. And he's trying to sort of deliberately send out a little bit of a message there, I think, to Arsenal fans. So yeah, fingers crossed Arsenal fans respond and we do get a really good atmosphere in on Sunday. It is definitely going to be important. Right, moving on. Oh, actually, before I move on to this question, just on Havertz and Gyökeres, he was asked in the embargoed section at a press conference yesterday, can they play together? Do you think they can play together? And he said that they can. He said, I haven't had to think about that really so far because of, but as it gets closer to Kai Havertz returning, then I'm going to think about it more and more. But I absolutely do think that they can and will play together. And I'm really interested by that. I think that's going to be such an intriguing part of how Arsenal look when Kai Havertz comes back, because Mikel Arteta is going to want Kai Havertz on the pitch, no doubt about it, more often than not. He loves Kai Havertz, what he brings to the team. But I don't necessarily think that that's definitely going to mean that Victor Gyökeres is going to be on the bench for a lot of games. So I think there's a really big scope for those two playing together. I think that could be a really interesting prospect. How close they play together in and around the penalty area, the physicality that they would bring, sort of difference that they would bring. One drops deep, Havertz, one goes forward. Gyökeres, are we going to see an old-fashioned 4-4-2 at times? I'm really interested by how that is going to look. Right, a couple of questions now before we wrap this one up for this Saturday morning. Kahuna is on the Discord. It says, on the topic of rotation, I would expect Arteta to consistently make 1 to 3 changes per game when the schedule is full. Making 4+ changes significantly changes the rhythm and flow of the team. You can do that against Port Vale, but against Brighton, for example, it's not as simple. The other piece of rotation that we're seeing more than last year is getting fresh legs on at 60, 70 minutes. That goes a long way to keeping players fresh, getting players minutes, and preventing injuries. Really good point. The only one I was slightly surprised at was Mikel against Fulham, when he made a couple of changes, didn't he, in the game? And then he made a third in sort of injury time. But that was one game where, for whatever reason, he felt like he wasn't going to make wholesale changes. It was obviously a very narrow game. It was just a 1-0 for a long, long time. But I think there are signs he's been getting better at that, and he absolutely needs to. When you've got a squad this big, you have to rotate it and you have to keep players fresh. It's one of the advantages it gives you. I do agree the Brighton game's a little bit difficult because it is Brighton, who are a very good team. And I don't think Brighton are going to make that many changes for this game. They'll be taking it seriously. which is why I don't think it's the greatest of cup draws for Arsenal. At least it's at home, which is one thing. But against Port Vale, obviously I think that day he made 10 changes. I can't remember off the top of my head if it was one player who stayed in from the previous league game. Can you really do that against Brighton? I'm not sure he'll go that big as a rotation as he did against Port Vale. There might be a couple who stay in, but the squad Arsenal have got, it does give you the opportunity to be able to do it if you want. So thank you very much for that on Kahuna. We got on from Canayo Dave. Says, hi Charles, great work you're doing. Thank you. Quick one, Jesus or Sanchez at their prime at Arsenal. Which would you rather have? It's Dave from Lagos in Nigeria. Sanchez. Sanchez was such an animal. Imagine Sanchez in his team. I was talking about Sanchez on Tuesday night when we were up with some friends before the Atletico Madrid game, and just saying, of all the positions in this team, where could you improve previous Arsenal players? It was that question that we were talking about. Who's best? If an Arsenal player, you could pick one Arsenal player who hasn't won anything to bring back into this team. Someone asked it to me on a show a few days ago, and we were talking about that while we were having dinner on Tuesday night. And the topic around Sanchez, of course, Sanchez has won stuff at Arsenal, so he couldn't count for that question. But the conversation came round to him, and it was just saying, imagine in this team dropping Alexis Sanchez at his prime in that left-sided attacking position with his work rate and everything like that, which Arteta would love. It would be just an amazing thing. As much as when Jesus was at his best for those first few months before the injuries took their toll, he was brilliant and I loved him. And I talk about that an awful lot. But Alexis Sanchez, for me, wow, what a player he was when he was at his best. And I just think he would fit so perfectly for this team as well, so perfectly. So yeah, definitely Alexis Sanchez for me. Thank you very much, David, for that. And that is it for me today, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Appreciate your time as always. I'll be back to do it all over again in the morning with the preview show ahead of Crystal Palace. And I'll be back after the game, hopefully talking about a very good Arsenal win. Until then, have a good day, everyone. Enjoy the start to your weekend. Bye-bye.